The multiverse is a tapestry of infinite realities, each with its own immutable laws. In one universe, vampires stalk the shadows of Earth, and immortal monsters wage eternal war. In another, humanity has transcended its violent past to explore the stars in peace. But what happens when a thread from the first universe tears violently through into the second, bringing with it a creature that thrives on the very chaos that Utopia sought to eliminate? The USS Enterprise, registry NCC 1701D, was conducting a routine survey of subspace anomalies near the neutral zone when sensors detected something that shouldn't exist. A dimensional rift bleeding energy signatures that defied Federation science. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge, his practiced calm masking concern as Data's fingers flew across the ops console. "Captain, the rift is expanding," Data reported, his golden eyes reflecting the swirling crimson vortex on the view screen. "Energy readings are inconsistent with any known phenomenon. I am detecting what appears to be organic matter within the subspace distortion." "Organic matter?" Riker leaned forward in his seat. "In subspace?" Before Data could respond, the rift pulsed violently. Someone was ejected from the tear in reality like a bullet from a gun, tumbling through the vacuum of space with impossible grace. The view screen automatically magnified the image, and the bridge crew found themselves staring at a figure that should not exist in their rational, scientific universe. He was tall, impossibly so, dressed in a red coat and wide-brimmed hat that somehow remained perfectly positioned despite the absence of atmosphere. Crimson eyes gleamed behind orange-tinted glasses, and a smile too wide and too sharp split his pale face. He wasn't wearing a spacesuit. He wasn't even attempting to breathe. He simply hung there in the void, arms spread wide as if embracing the vacuum, and then he waved, directly at the Enterprise bridge crew. "Is he alive?" Counselor Troy's voice was strained, her empathic abilities clearly struggling with whatever she was sensing. "I'm detecting something, but it's wrong. There are too many voices. Too many." She pressed her fingers to her temples, wincing. "Red alert," Picard commanded. "Shields up. Mr. Worf, analysis." The Klingon security chief's scowl deepened as he studied his tactical console. "Captain, sensors indicate the entity is humanoid, but readings are contradictory. Life signs are present, but also absent. Mass readings fluctuate between 70 kilograms and infinite. He registers as both matter and energy simultaneously." "That's impossible," Geordi LaForge muttered from his engineering station, his visor scanning multiple spectrums. "He's violating like 6 laws of physics just by existing." The figure in space tilted his head, and though there was no possible way for sound to travel through vacuum, every person on the bridge heard a voice, smooth, British, and dripping with amusement, speak directly into their minds. "Oh, this is new. I haven't been to space before. Usually I'm just in the metaphorical void of my own existence, much less starry." Picard straightened, decades of diplomatic experience pushing past his shock. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Federation Starship Enterprise. You have emerged from what appears to be an interdimensional rift. We mean you no harm and offer assistance if you require it." The smile widened impossibly further. "Assistance? Oh, that's adorable. You're like a particularly well-meaning golden retriever who just found a wolf in his backyard and is offering him a chew toy." A pause, and the figure brought a gloved hand to his chin in mock contemplation. "Actually, I could use some help. You see, I was in the middle of a perfectly delightful massacre, Nazis so morally justified and everything, when some git with a laboratory opened a hole in reality and sucked me through. Very rude. I was 3 kills away from a personal record. The bridge fell silent. Worf's hand moved to his phaser. Oh, and before any of you think about shooting me. The figure's form suddenly dissolved into shadows, reforming behind the Enterprise in a position that should have taken minutes to reach via impulse engines. He now floated upside down relative to the ship's orientation, arms crossed casually. I should mention that I'm very, very hard to kill. Like end-of-level boss hard. Dark Souls on nightmare mode hard. I'm talking you'll need a strategy guide and a YouTube tutorial levels of difficult. Fascinating. Data observed. He teleported 3.7 kilometers instantaneously without employing any detectable energy signature. Teleported? Sweetie, I didn't teleport. I just stopped being there and started being here. Totally different. One requires technology, the other requires a complete disregard for the laws of physics and a god complex the size of Jupiter. The figure gestured broadly at the gas giant visible in the distance. Speaking of which, nice solar system you've got here. Very clean, organized. Where are all the corpses? The blood feuds? The existential dread? Picard exchanged a glance with Riker before turning back to the view screen. We are a peaceful civilization. The United Federation of Planets has evolved beyond violence as a primary means of conflict resolution. The laughter that echoed through their minds was not cruel precisely, but it carried the weight of centuries and the amusement of a predator hearing prey describe their burrow as impregnable. Oh, this is going to be fun. The figure snapped his fingers, and reality bent. He stood now in the center of the bridge, not transported, not beamed, simply present where he had not been a moment before. The red coat settled around him like liquid blood, and up close, the crew could see details that sensors had missed. The crosses on his gloves, the ornate pistols holstered at his sides, the way shadows seemed to cling to him like loyal servants, and his eyes. God, his eyes. Behind those orange glasses burned something ancient and hungry and thoroughly, completely amused. I am Alucard, he said aloud now, his voice a rich baritone that seemed to make the air itself vibrate. No, that's not an anagram or anything. I just really like Castlevania. And you? He turned in a slow circle, taking in the bridge, the crew, the technology that represented the pinnacle of 24th century achievement. Are going to show me around this adorable little utopia of yours. He paused, sniffing the air like a hound catching a scent. Also, I'm going to need to eat someone eventually. Fair warning. Worf's phaser was in his hand instantly, the whine of the weapon powering up, cutting through the shocked silence. You will not harm anyone on this ship, creature. Alucard turned to face the Klingon, and his grin showed far too many teeth. Oh, I like you. You've got that whole warrior honor thing going on. Very integra, minus the smoking and the fantastic breasts. He tilted his head. Tell you what, big guy, shoot me. Go ahead, I insist. It's been at least 10 minutes since someone tried to kill me, and I'm starting to feel neglected. Stand down, Mr. Worf, Picard commanded, though his tone suggested it cost him. The captain approached slowly, hands visible, every instinct screaming that he was facing something his training had never prepared him for. Alucard, I don't know what universe you come from, but here we resolve matters through dialogue and understanding. If you require sustenance, we have replicators that can create nearly any. Blood, Alucard interrupted, his smile never wavering. I require blood, Captain Picard. Fresh, human, and with that special intangible quality that only comes from it being pumped through a living body moments before extraction. Your replicators can copy the chemistry, but they can't replicate the essence, the life, the fear. He leaned closer, and Picard held his ground through sheer force of will. So, unless you've got a blood bank and a very loose interpretation of medical ethics, we're going to have a problem. The dimensional rift behind them chose that moment to collapse, sealing with a sound like reality sighing in relief. Alucard glanced over his shoulder at the space where his doorway home had been. Huh. Well, that's inconvenient. He turned back to Picard, and despite the smile, despite the casual demeanor, there was something genuinely ancient in his gaze. Something that had seen civilizations rise and fall, that had outlasted empires and philosophies, that had learned to find humor in existence because the alternative was madness. So, Captain, you've got an unkillable vampire from another dimension trapped on your ship with nowhere to go and an eventual need to feed on your crew. How does your perfect little Federation handle that? He spread his arms wide. And before you answer, know that I've already counted 17 ways I could kill everyone on this bridge in the next 30 seconds, and I'm only at number 17 because I'm including the really creative options. Picard straightened his uniform, a gesture he'd performed thousands of times before negotiating with hostile forces, and met those terrible crimson eyes with the calm that had diffused conflicts across the quadrant. Mr. Data, inform Starfleet Command that we have a first contact situation of unprecedented nature. Counselor Troy, please escort our guest to a secure location where we can discuss this situation rationally. He fixed Alucard with a steady gaze. And, Alucard, you may find that humanity's evolution includes finding solutions you haven't imagined in your existence. We will find a way forward that doesn't require violence. Alucard's laugh was delighted, genuine, and promised absolutely nothing good. Oh, Captain, my Captain, I do hope you're right. But I've been around for a very, very long time, and I've learned one universal truth that I suspect even your enlightened future hasn't managed to change. Monsters like me don't play well with utopias. We're the thing your ancestors built those starships to escape from. He adjusted his glasses with one finger, the gesture somehow threatening. Lucky for you, I'm curious about what happens when an immovable philosophy meets an unstoppable hunger. And if you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. He blinked. Sorry, that just came out. Weird. Anyway, shall we continue this conversation somewhere with chairs? I have a feeling we're going to be at this for a while, and I do enjoy a good philosophical debate between the predator and the prey. The Enterprise bridge remained silent as Counselor Troy, her face pale but composed, gestured toward the turbo lift. Alucard followed with the easy grace of a man, or monster, who knew that every weapon on the ship was pointed at him and didn't care in the slightest. As the turbo lift doors closed, Picard allowed himself one moment of uncertainty before turning to his crew. Options? Worf's response was immediate. Recommend we eject him into space and maintain maximum warp until we're several parsecs away. He'd probably just walk back, Geordi muttered. Or swim. Can you swim through space if you don't care about physics? Data looked up from his console. Based on observed abilities, I calculate a 97.3% probability that conventional containment will prove ineffective. However, I am detecting something unusual in his quantum signature. He exists in what appears to be a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously present and absent across multiple possible states. What does that mean? Riker asked. It means, number one, Picard said quietly, staring at the turbo-lift doors, that we have welcomed aboard something that may be beyond our ability to control, contain, or even comprehend. Somewhere in the bowels of the Enterprise, in a secure conference room that the crew believed was safe. Alucard sat down in a chair that hadn't been designed for creatures like him and smiled at the walls. "Oh, I'm going to enjoy this," he murmured to the souls only he could hear. "They think they've evolved past monsters. They think peace and reason conquered the darkness. They have no idea that darkness never goes away. It just learns to wear a red coat and quote, Boondock Saints." He leaned back, crossing his legs, and waited for the next act to begin. The game, as they say, was afoot. The conference room on Deck 8 was designed for diplomacy. Neutral colors, comfortable seating, a view of space that reminded all parties of the vast universe they shared. It had hosted negotiations with Klingons, Romulans, even the occasional Ferengi trade dispute. It was a room built on the assumption that reason could bridge any divide. Alucard decided immediately that he hated it. "Too clean," he announced, running a gloved finger along the conference table. "Too bright, too optimistic. Where's the ambiance, the mood lighting, the sense of impending doom that really makes a negotiation sing?" He turned to Counselor Troy, who stood by the door with Security Officer Martinez, both watching him like scientists observing a particularly dangerous specimen. "Don't you people believe in atmosphere, Gothic architecture, maybe a few gargoyles? We prefer our meetings to be conducive to productive dialogue," Troy said carefully. Her empathic abilities were still reeling from proximity to him. It was like standing next to a stadium filled with screaming souls, all crammed into one body. She'd never sensed anything like it, not even from the Borg. Productive dialogue. Alucard repeated the words, like he was tasting wine that had turned to vinegar. Right. Because nothing says productivity, like ignoring the fact that you've got a Class 5 apocalypse sitting at your conference table making small talk. He sat down, throwing his boots up onto the pristine surface, and pulled out what appeared to be a smartphone. Anachronistic, impossible, and clearly not Federation technology. He began scrolling through it with the casual disinterest of someone waiting for a delayed flight. No signal. Figures. Interdimensional roaming charges were always murder. He glanced up at Martinez, whose hand rested on his phaser. "You gonna shoot me, or are you just happy to see me?" "Stand down" would be the appropriate phrasing, Martinez said stiffly, though his finger didn't leave the weapon's trigger. "Oh, I like that. Very professional. Very, I'm pointing a gun at you, but I'm civil about it. Your mother raised you right." Alucard's smile widened. "Before she died, I assume. Everyone's parents are dead eventually. Occupational hazard of mortality." The door hissed open before Troy could respond. Captain Picard entered, followed by Commander Riker, Lieutenant Commander Data, and, to Alucard's visible delight, Worf, whose hand also rested on his phaser and whose expression suggested he was imagining creative ways to test Alucard's claims of immortality. "Gentlemen and lady," Alucard greeted, not bothering to remove his feet from the table. "Welcome to what I'm sure will be a fascinating exercise in futility. Captain, I'm going to save us all some time and tell you how this goes. You're going to try to understand me. I'm going to be deliberately unhelpful. Someone's going to suggest using force. I'm going to demonstrate why that's adorable. And then we'll circle back to the fundamental problem that I'm unkillable, hungry, and very, very bored." Picard took his seat at the head of the table with the patience of a man who'd negotiated with Q. "I appreciate your candor, though I hope you're wrong about the futility. We've encountered many unique beings in our travels. Energy beings, omnipotent entities, even travelers from other dimensions. In each case, we've found common ground through understanding and mutual respect." "Oh, this is going to be good." Alucard leaned forward, elbows on the table. Hit me with it, Captain. What's your opening move? The Prime Directive speech? The "we're all citizens of the universe" routine? Or are we going straight to the "violence isn't the answer" sermon? I was going to start, Picard said evenly, by asking what you want. Alucard blinked. Then he laughed, a genuine sound of surprise. Well played. Skip the philosophy, go straight to motivation. Very efficient. He leaned back, fingers steepled. What do I want? Let's see. I want to go home, but my doorway's closed. I want entertainment, but your universe seems to have sanitized all the fun bits. I want a feed, but apparently you've eliminated murder and warfare, which, kudos, by the way, very impressive, but absolutely terrible for my dietary needs. We have not eliminated violence entirely, Worf interjected, his voice a growl. We have simply evolved beyond using it as a first resort. Oh, the Klingon speaks. Alucard's attention swiveled like a predator spotting movement. Let me guess. Warrior culture, honor-bound? Probably itching to test yourself against me because your instincts are screaming that I'm a threat and your entire species is hardwired for combat. Am I close? Worf's jaw tightened. Close enough. I like you more and more, big guy. You're honest about what you are. Not like... He gestured vaguely at the rest of the crew. All this evolved humanity nonsense. You know what you are. A predator in a society of prey animals who's learned to wear their clothing and speak their language. Stockholm Syndrome with better benefits. Lieutenant Worf is a valued member of Starfleet, Picard said, a warning edge entering his tone. And I'll thank you not to insult my crew. Insult? Captain, I just gave him the highest compliment I know. I called him honest. Alucard's smile never wavered. The insult would be pretending he's something he's not. Like pretending I'm going to sit here and play nice while you run your scans and try to figure out how to neutralize me. Data's head tilted slightly. You are aware we are scanning you? Of course I'm aware. I can hear your sensors bouncing off me like mosquitoes. Very ticklish. Also very useless. You're getting contradictory readings because I exist in a state of quantum uncertainty. I'm here, I'm not here, I'm everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. It's a long story involving a Nazi catboy and a very unfortunate decision on my part. But the end result is that I'm basically unkillable, uncontainable, and unmeasurable. A Nazi catboy, Riker repeated flatly. Don't ask. It was weird for everyone involved. Alucard waved dismissively. The point is, your technology can't pin me down because I exist outside the normal rules of your reality. I'm a supernatural entity in a universe that runs on science. Square peg, round hole, lots of awkward forcing. If you're from another dimension, Data said, it is logical to conclude that your home universe operates on different fundamental principles. Perhaps what you call supernatural is simply a different configuration of physical laws. Oh, I like this one. Alucard pointed at Data. Android? Positronic android, yes. Fantastic. Finally, someone who might actually understand me. You're both things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. We're like metaphysical siblings. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Tell me, Data, do you dream of electric sheep? I do not require sleep, therefore I do not dream. However, I am familiar with the Philip K. Dick reference. Of course you are. Probably got the whole library memorized. Alucard's grin was almost fond. You and I are going to have some fascinating conversations about the nature of existence. But first, he turned back to Picard. We need to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the vampire at the table. Your need to feed, Picard said quietly. Got it in one. Alucard's expression didn't change, but something in his tone shifted. became more serious, more honest. I'm not going to lie to you, Captain. I'm a predator. I consume human blood. Not because I'm evil, though I'm definitely not good, but because it's what I am. In my universe, I work for an organization that points me at monsters worse than myself and lets me loose. It's a system that works. But here, he gestured at the sterile walls. You don't have monsters. You have misunderstood species and cultural differences and diplomatic incidents. Very enlightened, absolutely useless for someone like me. The Federation has blood banks, Riker offered. Medical supplies for emergencies. We could... Replicated blood, Alucard interrupted. I heard the captain mention it earlier. Here's the problem. Replicated blood is to me what replicated steak is to you, technically nutritious, but missing something essential. The life, the fear, the essence that comes from a living being. I need that essence to survive long term. He paused. I can go without for a while, weeks, maybe months. But eventually the hunger becomes problematic. Define problematic, Worf demanded. Ever seen a starving animal backed into a corner? Now imagine that animal is immortal, can phase through walls, and has the accumulated combat experience of 600 years. That level of problematic. The conference room fell silent. Troy's face was pale, her empathic abilities, no doubt, picking up the absolute sincerity behind Alucard's words. He wasn't threatening them, he was warning them. There must be an alternative, Picard said. Some way to sustain you without requiring you to harm my crew or any Federation citizens. Oh, I'm sure we'll think of something. Alucard's casual tone had returned. Maybe you've got some prisoners somewhere, criminals awaiting rehabilitation. I'm very open-minded about my food sources. Murderers, rapists, the morally irredeemable. I'm practically providing a public service. The Federation does not have a death penalty, Picard said firmly. Every sentient being has the right to rehabilitation and a second chance. How very noble. How very doomed. Alucard stood, and despite the fact that he made no threatening moves, every security officer in the room tensed. Captain, I respect what you're trying to build here. Really, I do. A universe without violence, without predation, where everyone gets a participation trophy and a second chance. It's adorable. But you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. He walked to the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, staring out at the stars. You think you've evolved beyond violence. You think you've transcended the food chain. But the truth is, you've just sanitized it. You've pushed all the blood and teeth and honest brutality off screen and congratulated yourselves for being civilized. But He turned, and his eyes gleamed red in the starlight. I'm the thing you evolved away from. The nightmare you convinced yourselves doesn't exist anymore. And now I'm here, in your perfect future, a living reminder that you can build all the starships you want, but you can't build your way out of the fundamental truth of existence. Some things eat, and some things get eaten. We are not prey, Worf said, his voice deadly quiet. No, Alucard agreed. You're not. You're something more interesting. You're predators who've forgotten they have teeth, and I'm genuinely curious what happens when you remember. The door chimed. Picard called, "Enter," and Geordi LaForge stepped in, his expression troubled. Captain, we've completed our scans. I think you need to see this. The bridge's main view screen displayed something that made even Data's expression shift toward what might have been concern. Geometric patterns spiraled across the display. Quantum probability fields, energy signatures, and biological readings that contradicted themselves with every refresh. What am I looking at, Geordi? Picard asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Geordi tapped his pad, and the image zoomed in on a specific data cluster. This is Alucard's quantum signature. Captain, he's not just one entity, he's millions. My visor is picking up discrete consciousness patterns nested inside his primary matrix. It's like... He struggled for the comparison. It's like he's a ship and he's got millions of passengers, except the passengers are all part of him somehow. Absorbed souls, Alucard said cheerfully from where he stood at the viewport. 424 867 at last count, though I may have picked up a few extras during that Nazi incident before I got yanked here. Every person I've consumed, every vampire I've killed, they're all in here. He tapped his temple, living forever inside me. It's very cozy, bit crowded, but we make do. The bridge crew stared at him. Even Worf looked momentarily disturbed. You have consumed over 3 million people? Data asked, his tone carrying something almost like disbelief. Give or take. I've been around for about 600 years, so that averages to, let's see, roughly 5,708 people per year, or about 15.6 people per day, though obviously there were some very busy centuries and some very slow ones. The world wars were particularly productive. Alucard noticed their expressions. Oh, don't look at me like that. Most of them were Nazis, vampire cultists, or people actively trying to kill me first. I'm not a monster, well, I am. But I'm a monster with standards. This is insane, Riker muttered. This is impossible, Geordi corrected. According to our understanding of biology, consciousness, and quantum mechanics, he shouldn't be able to exist. The sheer amount of information storage alone would require... He stopped, running calculations. Would require processing power beyond anything we've ever encountered outside of the Borg collective. Oh, please don't compare me to the Borg. Alucard made a disgusted face. They're all about conformity, and we are one, and boring mechanical efficiency. I'm about individuality, chaos, and the absolute certainty that I'm better than everyone else. Completely different philosophies. The Borg? Worf said slowly, and something dangerous entered his voice. You know of them? Know of them. Buddy, I can sense them. There's a presence out there. Alucard gestured vaguely toward the nearest Borg trajectory, though he shouldn't have been able to know the direction. A collective consciousness. Millions of minds linked together, all thinking the same thoughts. It's actually kind of beautiful, in a horrifying, give up your individuality for the greater good way. Also, they're heading this direction, slowly, very purposefully, like they've detected something interesting. The bridge fell deathly silent. You're saying the Borg are coming here? Picard's voice was ice. Now? Not now. More like, eventually now. Few weeks, maybe? I'm not great with distances in space. Everything's so spread out up here. But yeah, they definitely noticed when I popped into this universe. I probably lit up their sensors like a Christmas tree made of distinctiveness we must assimilate. He paused. Do you still have Christmas in the future? Please tell me you kept Christmas. Geordi, verify this, Picard ordered. LaForge was already at his station, fingers flying across the console. His expression grew more troubled with each passing second. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting a Borg cube. It's 3 weeks out at current speed, but it's definitely on an intercept course. How did he... Because I'm magic, Alucard said flatly. Well, technically I'm a supernatural entity existing outside your normal physical laws, but magic is shorter and more fun to say. I can sense things your technology can't. Consciousness, life force, the general vibe of the universe. And right now, the universe is vibing very, oh shit, the Borg are coming. Picard's mind raced. A Borg cube. 3 weeks. And an interdimensional vampire who'd somehow drawn their attention. Mr. Data, confirm the cube's trajectory. Confirmed, Captain. The Borg vessel is maintaining a direct course toward our position. At current speed, they will intercept in 22.3 days. They're coming for me, Alucard said, and he sounded almost pleased. They detected something unique, something they've never assimilated before. And now they want to add my biological and technological distinctiveness to their collective. It's actually kind of flattering. Last time someone was this interested in me, it was a psychotic vampire priest who wanted to use me to achieve heaven. That ended poorly for him. This is not a joke, Picard said sharply. The Borg are the most dangerous threat the Federation has ever faced. They've destroyed entire civilizations. If they're coming for you, then I'll destroy them. Alucard's tone was casual, but his eyes had gone cold. Captain, I've fought armies. I've fought crusades. I've fought an entire Nazi battalion equipped with vampire technology and backed by a 1,000-year-old artificial vampire who thought he was going to conquer Britain. The Borg are just another army with delusions of superiority. The only difference is they're mechanical instead of biological. You don't understand, Riker said. The Borg adapt. Whatever you throw at them, they learn to defend against it. We've seen them adapt to phaser fire in seconds. Fascinating. Tell me, do they adapt to having their consciousness ripped out of their bodies and consumed? Alucard's smile was predatory. Because that's kind of my specialty. I don't just kill things, I eat them. Mind, body, soul, the whole package. And once they're inside me, they don't get to be part of the collective anymore. They're part of me. Forever. Data's head tilted. You are suggesting you could disrupt the Borg collective by consuming individual drones? I'm suggesting I could consume the entire cube and add several thousand mechanical zombies to my personal collection of souls. Would be interesting to see if their hive mind survives intact inside me, or if it fragments into individual consciousnesses again. Could go either way. Science is fun like that. Worf stepped forward. You claim you can fight the Borg. Prove it. Oh, now he wants to see me fight. Where was this energy back in the conference room? Alucard turned fully to face the Klingon, and something shifted in his posture, the casual humor fading, replaced by something ancient and utterly lethal. You want a demonstration, warrior? You want to see what 600 years of accumulated combat experience looks like? Because I promise you, it's not the noble duel you're imagining. It's fast, it's brutal, and it's very, very messy. I want to know if you are an asset or a liability, Worf said steadily. If the Borg are coming, we need to know what you can do. Picard held up a hand. Gentlemen, we are not conducting combat trials on my bridge. Alucard, if you're willing to assist in defending against the Borg, we would welcome your help. But I need to know what you're capable of, beyond claims and threats. Fair enough. Alucard glanced around the bridge, his gaze settling on the holodeck access panel. You have holodecks, right? Simulated reality technology? I saw the specs in Data's database when I telepathically skimmed his mind earlier. You did what? Data's tone was sharp, the closest he'd come to expressing genuine alarm. Relax, I didn't take anything important. Just browse the cliff notes of your memories. Very organized filing system, by the way. Almost German in its efficiency. Alucard waved dismissively. Point is, you can create simulated combat scenarios. So create one. Throw your worst at me. Simulated Borg, Romulans, Klingon warriors, whatever nightmares your database has on file. I'll show you exactly what I can do. Hell, I'll even handicap myself. No intangibility, no teleportation, just good old-fashioned vampire brutality. Fair? Picard looked to Riker, who nodded slowly. It would give us tactical data. And if the Borg are really coming? Very well. Picard turned to Worf. Lieutenant, prepare Holodeck 1 for a combat simulation. Standard Borg encounter scenario. Alucard, you'll have your demonstration. But understand this. If you're going to be on my ship when the Borg arrive, you will follow my orders. Is that clear? Alucard's smile returned, but it had an edge to it now. Captain, I haven't followed orders from anyone except my master for 600 years. But since she's not here and you're the closest thing to authority this universe is offering, I'll make you a deal. I'll help you fight the Borg. I'll even try to minimize collateral damage to your ship and crew. But I fight my way on my terms, with my methods. You want my help? You get all of me. Not the sanitized, Starfleet-approved version. That's not how we operate, Picard said firmly. Then you operate your way, and I'll operate mine. And we'll see whose approach leaves fewer casualties when the Borg start cutting through your shields like tissue paper. Alucard headed toward the turbo lift, then paused at the door. Oh, and Captain? When the Borg try to assimilate me, and they will try, don't interfere. I want to see what happens when they attempt to absorb 3 million souls at once. Should be hilarious. You could be assimilated, Data pointed out. Your quantum uncertainty may not protect you from Borg nanoprobes. Or, and hear me out on this, the nanoprobes could try to assimilate me, discover they're dealing with something that exists simultaneously across multiple quantum states and contains millions of consciousness patterns, and the resulting feedback could crash their entire local network. Alucard's grin was manic. Only one way to find out, and honestly, I'm betting on me. The turbo lift doors closed, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. He's insane, Geordi said finally. Perhaps, Data replied. However, his confidence may not be entirely unfounded. If his quantum state is truly as unstable as our readings suggest, Borg assimilation protocols may indeed fail. The collective has never encountered an entity that is simultaneously matter, energy, and consciousness across multiple probability states. He could also get us all killed, Worf growled. Picard stood slowly, his expression grave. Number 1, contact Starfleet Command. Inform them of the Borg threat and our unusual guest. Mr. Data, I want continuous monitoring of that Borg cube. And Mr. Worf, he looked at his security chief, prepare that holodeck simulation. Let's see what our vampire can actually do. As the crew moved to execute their orders, Picard returned to his ready room. He stood at his viewport, staring out at the stars, and thought about Q's words from years ago. The universe is not the tidy place you and your comfy Federation science have led you to believe. He'd encountered omnipotent beings, faced the Borg, even died and been resurrected. But Alucard was something different. Not a natural phenomenon to be studied, not a species to be understood, but a thing that shouldn't exist in a universe governed by reason and law. And in 3 weeks, that thing would face the Borg. Picard had a terrible feeling that the outcome would change everything. Holodeck 1 had seen its share of simulations, crew training exercises, diplomatic recreations, even the occasional Shakespeare play when Picard needed to unwind. But it had never been configured quite like this. Computer, Worf commanded, his voice carrying the edge of a warrior preparing for battle. Load Borg Encounter Program Omega-7. Environmental parameters, Borg cube interior. Enemy count, 20 drones. Adaptation protocols, maximum. Safety protocols. He paused, looking at Alucard. who stood in the center of the empty holodeck with his hands in his coat pockets. Active. Oh, leave them off, Alucard said cheerfully. Where's the fun if I know nothing can actually hurt me? Well, nothing here can hurt me, but you know what I mean. The illusion of danger adds spice. Absolutely not. Picard's voice came through the comm system. He watched from the observation deck along with Riker, Data, Troy, and Geordi. Safety protocols remain active. This is a demonstration, not a death match. Your funeral, or rather, your continued survival. Whatever. Alucard rolled his shoulders, and something about his posture changed, the casual humor bleeding away, replaced by a predator's focus. Computer, play Ready to Die by Andrew W.K. Actually, wait. Do you have that in your database? What year is it again? The current star date corresponds to... Rhetorical question, computer. Just, I don't know, play something with bass and violence, preferably both. The holodeck shimmered, and suddenly Alucard stood in the cold, geometric nightmare of a Borg cube's interior. Green-tinged lighting cast everything in a sickly glow. The mechanical hum of the cube's systems thrummed through the air like a massive heartbeat. And from the shadows, they came. 20 Borg drones, humanoid figures wrapped in mechanical augmentation, their skin pale and lifeless, their cybernetic implants gleaming in the harsh light. They moved with the synchronized precision of a hive mind, turning as one to face the intruder. We are the Borg, the collective voice echoed from every drone simultaneously. You will be assimilated. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. Alucard tilted his head, studying them like a collector examining new acquisitions. You know, I've heard variations of that speech before. Join us. Become one with the Master. Surrender your individuality for the greater good. It's always the same thing. Some collective entity that thinks absorbing everyone else is the path to perfection. He pulled off his glasses, folding them carefully and tucking them into his coat. His eyes blazed crimson in the dim light. Let me tell you something about perfection. It's boring. Individuality, chaos, the beautiful randomness of free will. That's what makes existence interesting. You want to assimilate me? He smiled, and it was the smile of a shark scenting blood. Come and try. The drones advanced, in perfect formation. The first one reached for Alucard with mechanical precision, its assimilation tubules extending from its hand. It never made contact. Alucard moved, and moved didn't do justice to what happened. One moment he was standing still. The next, he was behind the drone. His hand punched clean through its chest cavity from behind. Fingers wrapped around what might have been a heart or might have been a Borg power coupling. He ripped it out in a spray of lubricant and biological matter. Too slow, he said conversationally. The drone collapsed, but the others adapted instantly. Their movements became faster, more coordinated. 3 converged on him simultaneously from different angles. Alucard let them come. The first tubule pierced his shoulder, the second his chest, the third his neck. Borg nanoprobes flooded into his bloodstream. Trillions of microscopic machines designed to rewrite biology into technology, to convert flesh into circuitry. From the observation deck, Troy gasped. They're assimilating him. Wait, Data said, his eyes fixed on his tricorder. The nanoprobes. They're not functioning as intended. Inside the simulation, Alucard looked down at the tubules embedded in his body. The drones were frozen, their hive mind suddenly confused by what it was encountering. Then Alucard started laughing. Oh, this is fascinating. I can feel your little machines trying to rewrite my DNA, trying to access my consciousness, trying to add me to your collective. His eyes blazed brighter. "Let me show you what happens when you reach into something that reaches back." The drones began to scream. It was horrible. Not because Borg drones screamed, but because they didn't. They couldn't. Their pain was filtered through the collective, processed as mere data, filed away as irrelevant. But these drones were screaming. Raw, human sounds of terror that suggested whatever was happening to them had torn them loose from the hive mind. Black shadows erupted from Alucard's body, flowing through the tubules and into the drones like a reverse infection. The mechanical components began to crack and shatter. The pale flesh underneath writhed and twisted. And one by one, the drones collapsed, their cybernetic implants falling away like dead leaves, their bodies dissolving into shadow that flowed back into Alucard. "Fascinating," he murmured, his voice echoing strangely, as if speaking with multiple throats. "Your nanoprobes tried to assimilate my cells. But my cells aren't really cells anymore. They're semi-corporeal constructs held together by the souls I've consumed. Your machines couldn't process that, so they started trying to assimilate the souls instead. And then," he grinned at the observation deck, "the souls ate them back." The 3 drones that had attempted to assimilate him were gone, absorbed completely. The remaining 17 recalibrated, and suddenly the air filled with phaser fire. Not the stunning blue of Federation weapons, but the cutting green beams of Borg energy weapons. Alucard didn't dodge. The beams tore through him, punching holes through his chest, his head, his limbs. He stood there and took it, his body jerking with each impact like a puppet on strings. Then he stopped jerking. The holes remained, but he kept standing. Through the hole where his heart should have been, the drones could see the wall behind him. "My turn," he said, and his voice came from everywhere and nowhere. He drew his pistols, the massive Cassol and Jackal, and the sound of their firing was like thunder in the enclosed space. The bullets weren't normal ammunition. They glowed with a red energy that seemed to burn the air itself. When they struck the drones, they didn't just pierce metal and flesh. They unmade them, unraveling their physical structure at the molecular level. 4 drones disintegrated in the first volley. The remaining 13 split into 2 groups, trying to flank him. Alucard's response was to multiply, his form splitting into 3 identical versions, each moving independently, each firing those massive hand cannons with devastating precision. "Neat trick, right?" all 3 Alucards said simultaneously. "Shadow clones. Very anime. Very effective. Also very real. Each one of these is me, just slightly phased out of your primary reality. You'd need to hit all 3 simultaneously to do any lasting damage, and even then..." One of the clones was struck by concentrated fire from 6 drones, its body torn apart by the sustained barrage. It dissolved into shadows that flowed back into the other 2. "I just reconstitute. Honestly, boys, you're making this too easy." The remaining drones adapted again. This time they didn't attack. They began to analyze, their sensors sweeping over Alucard with increasing intensity. In the real Borg collective, this data would be transmitted instantly, processed by trillions of drones, and a counter-strategy would be formulated in milliseconds. But this was a simulation, and the simulated drones only had each other. "Oh, you're learning," Alucard said, genuinely pleased. "You've realized that conventional attacks won't work, so now you're trying to understand what I am. Very scientific, very rational, completely futile, but I respect the effort." He holstered his pistols and spread his arms wide. "Let me help you with your analysis. I am a vampire, a creature from another universe where the supernatural is as real as your technology. I've consumed millions of souls, each one adding to my power, my knowledge, my existence. I exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously alive and dead, here and not here, matter and shadow. I am the thing that goes bump in the night, the monster under the bed, the nightmare that hunts other nightmares. The air around him began to darken, shadows pooling at his feet like liquid night. And you, his voice dropped to something ancient and terrible, are just machines. Very sophisticated machines, but machines nonetheless. You have no souls, no individuality, no fear, which means you can't truly understand what you're facing. He clapped his hands together, and the shadows exploded outward. What emerged were hounds, massive, skeletal creatures made of solidified darkness with eyes like burning coals. They moved with impossible speed, leaping at the remaining drones, their jaws closing on metal and flesh with equal effectiveness. The drones tried to adapt, tried to adjust their shields and weapons, but the hounds were already inside their defenses, tearing them apart from within. In less than 30 seconds, all 13 remaining drones were destroyed. Alucard stood alone in the holodeck Borg cube, surrounded by the dissolved remains of his enemies, his hounds circling him like loyal pets. He looked up at the observation deck. So, still think I'm a liability? The observation deck was silent, save for the low hum of the holodeck systems powering down. The pristine white grid of the chamber had reasserted itself, but the memory of what they'd just witnessed hung in the air, like ozone after a lightning strike. "Computer and simulation," Picard said, his voice carefully controlled. He turned from the observation window, facing his senior staff. Their expressions ranged from Data's analytical curiosity to Worf's grim respect to Troy's visible distress. He wasn't just fighting them, Geordi breathed, his visor whirring as it reanalyzed the residual energy readings. He was consuming them on a quantum level. Those shadow hounds weren't just killing the drones, they were pulling their consciousness fragments into him, even simulated ones. "Fascinating," Data said, his fingers tapping his pad. The Borg adaptation protocols failed catastrophically. Each time they attempted to counter a specific ability, he demonstrated another that operated on a completely different principle. Phased energy weapons, biological assimilation, physical trauma. None of it was effective. He essentially overwhelmed their capacity to adapt by presenting too many variables simultaneously. But they were simulations, Riker pointed out. Real Borg would have the processing power of the entire collective behind them. True, Data acknowledged. However, the fundamental problem remains. Alucard does not operate on principles the Borg can comprehend, let alone counter. His existence violates their basic understanding of biology, physics, and consciousness. To assimilate him, they would need to fundamentally rewrite their definition of life. In the holodeck below, Alucard was brushing imaginary dust from his coat sleeves. He looked up, giving a cheerful wave. "So, pass or fail? Do I get a gold star, a participation ribbon, a slightly less hostile glare from Mr. Worf?" Picard tapped his comm badge. "Alucard, report to the observation deck. We need to discuss what we just saw." "Oh goody, a debrief. My favorite." He vanished from the holodeck floor and reappeared in the observation deck doorway, leaning against the frame with practiced nonchalance. "So, Captain, convinced I'm not completely useless?" "I'm convinced you're dangerous," Picard said honestly. "What you demonstrated in there, it goes beyond combat prowess. You didn't just defeat the Borg simulation, you unmade it, on a fundamental level." Alucard's smile was sharp. "That's because the Borg, for all their technological terror, are fundamentally simple. They're a single solution applied to every problem, assimilated, But I'm not a problem that can be solved by adding me to the collective. I am the collective. I already contain multitudes. Adding a few thousand drone minds to the 3 million plus already screaming in my head would be, at best, a minor traffic jam. Troy took a step forward, her dark eyes troubled. Those screams. When you absorbed the drones, they weren't simulated. I felt genuine terror, pain, confusion, as if the simulation had created actual consciousness for you to consume. Ah, the empath notices. Alucard's gaze softened fractionally. Your holodeck is very good, counselor. Good enough to create self-aware constructs for the purpose of training scenarios. Not full souls, not by a long shot, but echoes, impressions, enough for me to taste. And yes, they screamed. Everything screams when it's being unmade. It's the universe's least favorite process. This is monstrous, she whispered. No, it's honest. All traces of humor left his face. This is what predation looks like when you strip away the sanitized version your Federation has built. I consume. That is my nature. The Borg consume. That is theirs. The only difference is that I remember every face, every name, every life I've taken. They just add it to the database and move on. So tell me, which is more monstrous? The predator who acknowledges what he is, or the predator who convinces itself it's performing a public service? Picard cut through the brewing philosophical debate. We have 22 days before the Borg cube arrives. Your demonstration proved you can handle drones in limited numbers. But a full cube contains tens of thousands, possibly more. And they'll be adapting in real time, with the entire collective's intelligence behind them. Your point being? Alucard raised an eyebrow. My point being that we need a strategy, not just your personal approach to conflict, but a coordinated defense. The Enterprise cannot withstand a direct assault from a Borg cube. We need to either evacuate, fortify our position, or find a way to stop them before they arrive. Or, Alucard said, his eyes gleaming, we meet them halfway. The suggestion hung in the air. Explain, Worf demanded. Right now, they're heading here because they detected my arrival. They want to assimilate the shiny new anomaly, so we take the anomaly to them. We find a nice, empty patch of space, no planets, no civilian traffic, and we wait. When they show up, I board their cube. Alone. Suicide, Riker said flatly. From your perspective, maybe. From mine, Tuesday. Alucard leaned forward, his tone losing its mocking edge. Listen, you've seen what I can do to their drones. Now imagine that happening inside their cube, not on the surface, where they can isolate and contain, but in the heart of their ship, in their power distribution nodes, in their central plexus. I phase through their bulkheads, I appear in their engineering section, and I start unmaking everything. And every drone I consume, every bit of their collective consciousness I absorb, makes me stronger and weakens them. I'm not just a weapon against the Borg, I'm a virus. And I want to see how long it takes for the infection to become terminal. Data considered this. A fascinating proposition. If you can disrupt their hive-mind connectivity from within, you could cause cascading system failures. However, the risk is extreme. The Borg may have defenses against phased entities. They may attempt to trap you in a force field modulated to your quantum frequency. Then I'll eat the force field, or the generator, or the drone operating it. I'm very adaptable. Alucard shrugged. Look, you have two choices. Option A. You try to fight the Borg your way, with ships and torpedoes and strategies they've seen 100 times before. You'll lose ships, you'll lose people, and maybe, you drive them off. Option B. You let the professional monster do what he does best. Minimal risk to your crew, no collateral damage to innocent planets, and you get front row seats to what happens when an unkillable vampire invades a beehive. Picard studied him. The offer was tempting, too tempting. It solved so many problems. It protected his crew. It played to Alucard's demonstrated strengths. But it also meant unleashing something infinitely dangerous into the heart of the Federation's greatest enemy, with no guarantee of control. "What's in it for you?" Picard asked quietly. "You've shown no particular loyalty to the Federation, to my crew, or to any cause beyond your own entertainment. Why take this risk?" Alucard's smile returned, but it was different this time. Less manic, more contemplative. 3 reasons. 1. I'm bored. A Borg cube sounds like the most interesting puzzle I've encountered since I got here. 2. They're coming for me anyway. Proactive violence is always better than reactive violence. And 3, he looked at each of them in turn. You haven't tried to kill me yet. Oh, you've thought about it. Worf here dreams about it in vibrant Klingon detail. But you haven't actually tried. You offered me dialogue. You're trying to find a solution that doesn't end with someone being eaten. That's novel. And novelty is the rarest commodity in an immortal's existence. He pushed off from the doorway. "So, Captain, do we have a deal? You take me to a nice remote battlefield of my choosing. I handle the Borg. You watch from a safe distance and take notes. And when it's over, we go back to negotiating my long-term blood supply issue." Picard exchanged a look with Riker, then with Data. The android gave a slight, analytical nod. "Very well," Picard said at last. "We will attempt it your way, but on 2 conditions. First, we monitor the entire engagement. If it appears you're being overwhelmed or assimilated, we reserve the right to intervene." "Intervene how? By shooting the cube with your little phasers? Fine, whatever. Condition accepted. Second, no consuming the entire Borg collective. If this works, we contain the incident to that single cube. The last thing the galaxy needs is a vampire who's absorbed the knowledge and technology of the Borg." Alucard placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. "Captain, I would never. Well, I might, but I'll try to resist the temptation. A single cube's worth of drones should be a satisfying snack without giving me indigestion." Picard chose to ignore the phrasing. "Mr. Data, plot a course to the Gaudalis Rift. It's a nebula-rich region with minimal stellar traffic, perfect for an ambush. Mr. Worf, coordinate with tactical. I want a full suite of long-range sensors trained on that cube at all times. Number 1, inform Starfleet Command of our plan. Emphasize that this is a first contact experiment with a unique entity, and that we are proceeding under my discretion." As the crew moved to their tasks, Alucard lingered. "You know, for a man who represents a utopian future, you're pretty comfortable with deploying a monster as a weapon." Picard met his gaze. "I am comfortable with using every tool at my disposal to protect my crew and my civilization. You may be a monster, Alucard, but you're our monster for the moment. See that you remember which side you're on." Alucard's laugh echoed down the corridor as he walked away. "Oh, Captain, I'm not on anyone's side. That's what makes me so much fun." The Enterprise coasted through the ionized gases of the Gaudalis Rift. Her running lights dimmed, her sensors extended like the whiskers of a cat stalking prey. On the bridge, the atmosphere was one of controlled tension, the quiet before a storm that might shatter their understanding of warfare forever. "Cube on long-range sensors," Data announced from Ops. "Maintaining course and speed. Estimated intercept in 6 hours, 14 minutes. Picard sat in his command chair, a pade resting on his knee. It displayed the latest updates from Starfleet Command, a terse, heavily redacted message that essentially boiled down to, We have no precedent for this. Use extreme caution, and for God's sake, don't let that thing loose if you can help it." He set it aside. "Status of our guest?" "Alucard is in the main shuttle bay," Worf reported, his voice a low rumble. "He has declined any form of monitoring device. He stated, and I quote, 'If I die, you'll know because the screaming in your head will stop.'" Counselor Troy, seated beside Picard, paled slightly but said nothing. The psychic pressure of Alucard's presence had become a constant, low-grade headache for her, a discordant chorus at the edge of her perception. "He won't die," Riker said from the first officer's chair. "That's the problem. The question is, what happens if he wins too completely?" It was the unspoken fear. They were about to unleash a predator on a predator. The outcome was uncertain, but the potential for catastrophe was immense. What if Alucard absorbed the cube's collective knowledge and decided the Federation looked like the next course? What if he somehow corrupted the Borg, creating something even worse? "We proceed as planned," Picard said, his voice leaving no room for doubt. "We have given our word. We will observe, we will learn, and we will be ready for any outcome. Mr. Data, prepare the long-range probes. I want a complete sensor log of the engagement." In the cavernous shuttle bay, Alucard stood before the massive bay doors, staring at the swirling purples and blues of the nebula beyond. He was alone. He'd insisted on it. The souls within him were restless, chattering with anticipation. A new hunt. So many voices in one place. Metal and flesh, soulless and cold. "Can we eat them, Master? Can we?" "Patience, my darlings," he murmured, a faint smile on his lips. "All in good time." The intercom crackled. "Alucard, this is Picard. The Borg cube will be in transporter range in 10 minutes. We will maintain a distance of 50,000 kilometers. Are you prepared?" "Born ready, Captain. Though, a question, your transporters. If I get into trouble, can you beam me out?" There was a pause. "Theoretically, yes. But your quantum signature makes reliable transport challenging." "So that's a no. Excellent. Add stakes." He cracked his neck. "Open the doors when they're in visual range. I'll handle the rest." He didn't need a shuttle. He didn't need a spacesuit. The vacuum was an inconvenience, not an obstacle. His body didn't require oxygen. It required will, and his will was infinite. "Cube entering visual range," Data's voice reported. The bay doors slid open with a hydraulic sigh. The artificial gravity held the atmosphere in, creating a shimmering curtain of energy at the threshold. Beyond, the stars were shrouded in nebula, and in the center of the viewport, like a geometric cancer against the beauty of space, hung the Borg cube. It was immense, dark, and covered in green lights that pulsed with a malevolent, rhythmic intelligence. "Well," Alucard said, adjusting his cuffs, "time to go door knocking." He took 3 running steps and leapt into the void. There was no sound, no rush of air. One moment he was in the shuttle bay, the next he was tumbling silently through the abyss, his coat flapping in non-existent wind. He righted himself, facing the cube. It grew larger with terrifying speed. He didn't slow down. From the Enterprise bridge, they watched the sensor display. A single, impossible life sign shot across the distance like a bullet. "He's going to impact at relativistic speed," Geordi said, awed. "He'll tear right through the hull." "I do not believe that is his intention," Data said. It wasn't. 100 meters from the cube's dark metal surface, Alucard's form dissolved into a cloud of black smoke and crimson shadows. The cloud streamed forward, not impacting the hull, but seeping through it. through microscopic gaps, through energy conduit ports, through the very molecular spaces in the metal. He phased into the cube not as an intruder, but as a gas, an idea, a nightmare given form. Inside, he reconstituted. He stood in a corridor identical to the holodeck simulation, but infinitely more real. The air was cold and carried a sterile, metallic scent. The green light was harsher. The hum was deeper, a vibration he could feel in his teeth. And the presence, the vast, interconnected consciousness of the collective, was a pressure against his mind, curious, analyzing, and utterly devoid of fear. We are the Borg. You are the anomaly. You will be assimilated. The thought voice echoed through the corridor, through the metal, through the air itself. Alucard grinned. "Hello, boys. Miss me?" Drones emerged from side passages and doorways. Not 20, not 100. They filled the corridor ahead and behind, moving with that eerie, perfect synchronization. Tubules extended from their hands. Cutting beams powered up. He didn't let them make the first move. With a thought, he unleashed the hounds. Dozens of shadow beasts erupted from the darkness around him, surging forward in a silent, howling tide. They hit the front line of drones, and the orderly advance dissolved into chaos. Metal shrieked as it was torn apart. Drones fell, their components scattering, their consciousness fragments screaming into the void, before being sucked back into Alucard's waiting darkness. But the Borg adapted. The next wave of drones adjusted their personal shields, modulating them to dispel coherent shadow matter. The Hound's attacks began to glance off shimmering energy barriers. Resistance is futile. Your distinctiveness will be added to our own. You keep saying that, Alucard chuckled. He drew the castle. Let's test a theory. He fired not at the drones, but at the wall beside him. The blessed, anti-supernatural round, forged in a universe with different rules, struck the bulkhead. Instead of punching a hole, it caused a localized reality tremor. The complex machinery beneath the panel sparked and died. The lights in the corridor flickered. The drones closest to the impact stumbled, their synchronization broken for a fraction of a second. "Ah," Alucard purred. "Your cube runs on technology. Technology follows rules. My guns?" He fired the jackal into the ceiling, causing a conduit to explode in a shower of sparks and acrid smoke. "My guns are powered by fuck you." He began to move, a red streak in the gloom. He was no longer fighting to consume, not primarily. He was fighting to disassemble. He phased through drones, leaving their internal circuitry scrambled. He tore power conduits from the walls, hurling them like spears. He used his intangibility to walk through solid bulkheads, appearing in vital areas. A power distribution node, a data junction, a coolant processing station, wreaking havoc before the drones could even surround him. He was a poltergeist in the machine, a ghost of chaos in the temple of order. The collective responded. It analyzed the new threat. It determined that conventional drones were insufficient. The corridor he was currently dismantling sealed at both ends with reinforced blast doors. The atmosphere began to vent into space. Alucard stood in the howling gale, his coat whipping around him. Cute. He dissolved into shadows again, flowing through the microscopic seams of the blast door. He reformed in a vast, cathedral-like chamber. In the center, pulsing with green light, was a central nexus node, a thick pillar of technology and organic circuitry. Dozens of drones were physically linked to it, their eyes glowing as they processed data for the collective. And standing between him and the node was a new form of drone. Larger, more heavily augmented, armed with a weapon that hummed with unstable energy. A Borg tactical drone. "You are resilient. You will be studied." "You first," Alucard said. The tactical drone fired. The beam wasn't light or plasma. It was a torrent of nanites, a liquid spear of assimilation that could rewrite a planet's biosphere. It struck Alucard's center mass, and for the first time, he felt a ripple of, not pain, but interference. The nanites weren't trying to assimilate his biology. They were trying to analyze his quantum state, to pin him down to a single reality where their weapons could work. Shadows bled from him, forced out by the torrent. The souls within shrieked in discordant fury. "Okay," Alucard growled, his voice layering with the voices of the dead. "Now you have my attention." He stopped resisting the beam. He let it pour into him. The nanites flooded his semi-corporeal form, trillions of them, mapping, analyzing, attempting to stabilize the impossible. And then he opened the cages. He let the souls out, not as hounds, but as a tidal wave of raw, psychic anguish. The accumulated terror, rage, and madness of 3 million violent ends. The nanites, designed to process biological and technological data, had no protocol for this. They were flooded with impossible information, the sensation of 1,000 different deaths, the taste of fear, the color of despair. The tactical drone's weapon overloaded. The feedback shot back up the beam. The drone itself began to vibrate, its systems seizing as incompatible data corrupted its processes. Its optical implant shattered. It collapsed, twitching. The nanites inside Alucard? He absorbed them too. He felt their tiny, mechanical consciousnesses, not souls, but programs, directives, and he subsumed them. He didn't add them to his collection. He used them as fuel, converting their energy to reinforce his own chaotic nature. He looked up at the central nexus. The drones linked to it were frantically trying to sever their connections, to quarantine the impossible data now flooding their network. "Too late," Alucard whispered. He placed a hand on the cold surface of the nexus pillar. He didn't try to break it. Instead, he began to sing, a low, discordant melody woven from the screams of the damned. It was a sound that shouldn't exist, a waveform of pure supernatural negation. The green light within the pillar flickered. Then it began to pulse erratically, strobing like a failing heart. A deep, grinding groan echoed through the cube, a sound of metal under impossible stress. On the Enterprise bridge, the sensor displays went wild. Massive energy fluctuations inside the cube, Data reported, his fingers flying. Power levels are dropping erratically. I am detecting chaotic psychic emanations. The Borg collective signal from that vessel is becoming fragmented. Picard watched the view screen. The cube, which had been moving with relentless purpose, now seemed to stagger in space. A few of its external lights winked out. A vent of plasma erupted from its side. "What's he doing in there?" Riker breathed. "I believe," Data said, looking up with an expression of profound curiosity. "He is giving them a nightmare from which they cannot wake up." The groan that echoed through the Borg cube was not just sound. It was a structural protest. The song of a vast machine experiencing a system failure of the soul. The central nexus node, under Alucard's touch, didn't crack or explode. It bleached. The vibrant, sickly green of Borg technology faded to a dead, concrete gray for a meter in every direction from his hand, the color leaching away like life from a corpse. The effect spread in branching, lightning-like tendrils through the connected circuitry. The drones physically linked to the node didn't just disconnect. They desynchronized. Their eyes, once glowing with the flat light of the collective, flickered and went dark. One by one, they slumped in their harnesses, not dead, but isolated. For the first time in possibly centuries, they were alone in their own skulls. and the silence was a terror the Borg had never programmed them to understand. Pattern recognized. The collective voice in Alucard's mind was no longer a statement. It was an analysis, tinged with something new. Urgency. Anomaly utilizes metaphysical corruption vectors, implementing quarantine protocol Omega. The chamber's far wall irised open. What entered was not more drones. It was a field of distortion, a shimmering wall of oscillating energy that advanced toward him, humming at a frequency that made the very shadows in the room vibrate painfully. A reality stabilizer field. The Borg's answer to his quantum uncertainty: if they couldn't assimilate his chaos, they would try to force him to obey their local physics. Now that's more like it. Alucard laughed, though the sound was strained as the field passed over him. He felt a pressure, a tugging sensation, as if the universe itself was trying to decide what shape he should be. His edges grew sharper, more defined. The comforting, omnipresent murmur of his internal souls dimmed slightly. Muffled by the field, he was being pinned down, made real in a way that made him vulnerable. He phased, attempting to slip through the floor. The field followed, propagating through the deck. He tried to dissolve into smoke. The oscillations disrupted the cohesion, forcing him back into solidity. For the first time since arriving in this universe, he was constrained. Quarantine effective, commencing analysis and assimilation. From apertures in the ceiling, intricate mechanical arms descended, tipped not with weapons, but with scanners and delicate injector arrays. They moved with surgical precision, bypassing his coat, seeking points on his neck and wrists. They were going to try again, but this time with him held in a bottle. Alucard stopped fighting the field. He stood still, his head bowed, his hat shadowing his face. The humming filled the chamber. The arms approached. "You think you've won," he said, his voice quiet, almost conversational. "You think you've finally found a box to put the monster in. You're making a fundamental mistake." The lead injector hovered an inch from his carotid artery. "You see me as a problem to be solved, an equation to be balanced. But I'm not a problem." He looked up, and his eyes were no longer just crimson. They were windows into a starless void where things older than stars swam. "I'm the conclusion." He didn't attack the arms. He didn't attack the field. He reached into himself. He grabbed not a single soul, but a cluster of them, a specific set. The memories of every priest, every fanatic, every true believer he had ever consumed over 6 centuries. Men and women whose faith was a fire that burned brighter than reason. He didn't release them. He channeled them. A sound began, low at first, then swelling to fill the quarantine chamber. It was a choir. 1,000 voices singing a hymn, but corrupted, distorted by the mediums of death and digestion. It was sacred music played on infernal instruments. It was faith weaponized as a sonic and psychic attack. The Borg technology, a pinnacle of pure atheistic logic, had no defense. The stabilizer field, a product of predictable waveforms, could not process the impossible counter-harmonics of damned prayer. The oscillating hum stuttered, skipped, and shattered into dissonant fragments. The field collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. The mechanical arms froze, twitched, and went limp. But Alucard wasn't done. The choir was still singing. He directed it outward, not as a weapon, but as a probe. He let the wave of corrupted faith wash through the cube's systems, not to destroy, but to ask a question the Borg's logic could not answer. "What is the shape of your soul?" The query propagated through data streams, across neural links, into the very core of the collective consciousness present in the cube. For a nanosecond, the entire local hive mind experienced a system-wide error. It was not an attack on their bodies or their code, but on their fundamental, unexamined premise that they had transcended such things as souls. The paradox of the question, delivered via a vector they could not classify, caused a catastrophic logic loop. Alerts bloomed across the Enterprise's tactical display. The Borg cube? It's stopping, Data said, genuine astonishment in his tone. Full power to structural integrity and inertial dampeners. All propulsion has ceased. Weapons are offline. They are dedicating 97% of their processing capacity to an internal calculation. What kind of calculation? Picard demanded. Unknown, Captain. The nature of the processing is entirely novel. It appears to be philosophical. On the bridge, they watched, stunned, as the cube, their nemesis, the devourer of worlds, hung dead in space, its lights flickering in frantic, confused patterns. Inside the cube, Alucard walked unopposed. Drones stood frozen at their stations, caught in the recursive loop. He found a central access terminal, its surfaces still glowing. He placed his hand on it, not to corrupt it, but to listen. The collective's thoughts were a storm of static and dead ends. Query, soul. Definition, non-corporeal essence. Evidence, none. Counter-evidence, anomaly presents empirical data. Contradiction, assimilation objective, add distinctiveness. Distinctiveness includes metaphysical assertion. Assertion requires evaluation. Evaluation requires framework. Framework does not exist. Create new framework? YN processing? Error. They were stuck. He had asked them to solve a spiritual calculus problem, and their entire existence was built on materialist arithmetic. To solve it, they would have to become something they were not. Alucard smiled. This was better than eating them. This was art. He opened a channel, patching into the Enterprise's comms through the Borg's own systems. Captain Picard, a moment of your time. Alucard. Picard's voice was sharp with tension. Report, what have you done? I've given them homework, and they're struggling. It's adorable. Alucard leaned against the terminal. Here's the situation. The local collective in this cube is currently experiencing what you might call an existential crisis. They can't process me, so they're trying to redesign their entire worldview to accommodate me. It'll take them, a while, but they will solve it eventually. Borg are nothing if not persistent. What is your intention? My intention? To offer you a choice. I can finish this. I can let the souls out for a real feast and turn this cube into a haunted hollow shell, or... He paused dramatically. You can have it. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Explain, Picard said, his voice dangerously calm. This cube is currently incapacitated. Its drones are catatonic. Its systems are vulnerable. It's not destroyed. It's... Paused. You could send over your engineers, your scientists. You could study it, strip it, learn its secrets in perfect safety. A fully intact, non-hostile Borg cube. It's the intelligence coup of the millennium. And the price? Riker's voice cut in. The price is you don't get to watch the glorious, messy finale. And you have to promise to keep any captured drones very secure. Because when they wake up from this little trance, they'll be changed, confused, possibly even individual. And a confused, individual Borg drone is a sad and dangerous thing. Picard's mind raced. The strategic value was incalculable. The risks were astronomical. It was a Trojan horse of unimaginable proportions offered by the devil himself. Why offer this? Picard asked. You wanted a fight. You wanted to consume. I did, Alucard admitted. But I've realized something. Utter annihilation is quick. It's simple. What I've done to them? It's complicated. I haven't just beaten them. I've broken their ideology. I've introduced a paradox into a system that cannot tolerate paradox. Watching you all try to deal with the aftermath, to fit this square peg of a corrupted cube into the round hole of your Federation principles, that might be even more entertaining than a massacre. He was telling the truth, Picard sensed. For a being of infinite boredom, creating an infinite problem was the ultimate diversion. We would need to ensure the cube is completely neutralized, Data offered. We could deploy modified transporter tags to each drone, set to disrupt neural activity if they reactivate with hostile intent. See? He's already planning. That's the spirit. Alucard's grin was audible over the comm. So, Captain, what's it going to be? The clean, violent end you expected? Or the messy, complicated victory that will keep your philosophers and tacticians arguing for decades? Picard looked at his crew. At Worf's fierce scowl, at Data's analytical gaze, at Troy's empathetic worry, at Riker's cautious hope. He thought of the billions of lives a Borg cube could end, and the billions more that could be saved by understanding it. He made his choice. Begin deploying the transporter tags, Mr. Data. Prepare a full science and engineering team. Maximum security protocols. He took a deep breath. Alucard, stand down. The cube is ours. Over the comm, they heard a slow, satisfied clap. Bravo, Captain. You've just accepted a gift that will haunt your Federation forever. I'm so proud. The channel cut off. In the heart of the silent, bleeding cube, Alucard dematerialized, not in shadows, but in a satisfied puff of sanguine mist. He had come for a fight, and instead, he had given the Utopians a poison pill wrapped in a prize ribbon. He couldn't wait to see how they choked on it. The Enterprise hung beside the inert Borg cube like a remora beside a slumbering whale. The contrast was stark. One, a graceful curve of duranium and hope. The other, a stark geometric slab of assimilation and dread, now silenced. Shuttlecraft flitted between them like nervous birds, ferrying teams of engineers in hazard suits and security personnel with modified rifles. On the bridge, the mood was one of shell-shocked triumph. They had neutralized a Borg cube without firing a single photon torpedo, without losing a single life. It was an unprecedented victory, and yet the taste was undeniably bitter. Tagging operations are 70% complete, Data reported from his station. The drones offer no resistance. Their cortical implants show minimal activity, stuck in a loop processing the anomalous metaphysical query. Engineering teams report they have accessed primary power distribution and are installing remote cutoffs. Picard stood at his ready room viewport, watching the activity. He had just finished a strained, classified briefing with Starfleet Command. Admirals had alternated between congratulating him and interrogating him about the non-corporeal entity now residing on his ship. The orders were a masterpiece of bureaucratic contradiction. Secure the cube, study the cube, contain the entity, cooperate with the entity. The cube is a top priority asset. The entity is a top priority threat. Captain, Counselor Troy's soft voice came from behind him. She entered, her expression troubled. The emotional residue from the cube. It's fading from confusion into something else. It's hard to describe. It's not the collective's hunger. It's more like grief, loss, a profound sense of disconnection. Picard turned. The drones? Feeling grief? Not as individuals, not yet. But the Gestalt consciousness that remains is wounded. It's been shown a door it cannot open, shown it is incomplete. For a being whose entire purpose is to become perfect, that realization is a kind of agony. Before Picard could respond, the door chimed. Enter. It was Geordi, still in his environmental suit, his visor glowing. Captain, you need to see this. We found something in the cube's central plexus. Or it found us. The interior of the Borg cube was a tomb of green light and frozen motion. Picard, flanked by Worf and 2 security officers, followed Geordi through the labyrinthine corridors. Drones stood at attention or lay slumped over consoles, each adorned with a small, blinking transporter tag on their temple. The silence was profound, broken only by the hum of Federation equipment and the distant echo of their footsteps. They arrived at the chamber Alucard had corrupted. The central nexus node was still bleached a dead gray, the tendrils of that necrosis having spread through nearby systems like frost on a window. But in front of it, something new had grown. A structure had emerged from the floor, smooth, organic-looking, and made of a dark, obsidian-like material that seemed to drink the light. It was not Borg technology. It was shaped like a twisted, abstract tree, and at its heart, suspended in a cage of thorns, was a single pulsing orb of crimson light. It started forming about 20 minutes ago, Geordi said, his voice hushed. My scans can't penetrate it. It doesn't register as matter or energy. It's reading like him. As if on cue, the crimson orb pulsed, and Alucard's voice emanated from it, smooth and amused. A little souvenir. I was feeling artistic. Call it a fusion piece. Borg order meets my particular brand of chaos. I call it cognitive dissonance in C minor. Picard stepped closer, ignoring Worf's warning hand. What is its purpose, Alucard? Purpose? Must everything have a purpose? Can't a monster leave a monument to his visit? The orb pulsed lazily. But if you insist on being practical, think of it as a battery, a storage unit. It contains let's call it the metaphysical pressure I exerted on the collective, the unsolvable problem, the paradox. You have trapped the anomaly, Data stated, having arrived silently. He scanned the structure with a tricorder. Fascinating. You have created a localized, self-sustaining quantum paradox, using the cube's own processing matrix as a substrate. Gold star for the android. It's a feedback loop they can't escape. As long as this little art project exists here, plugged into their main systems, this cube's collective mind will be stuck trying to solve the puzzle. It keeps them docile for your eggheads to poke and prod. Picard's eyes narrowed. And if we remove it, or destroy it? Then the loop breaks. The cube's consciousness will reboot. It'll be angry, confused, and very likely resume its primary objective, assimilating everything. So I'd advise against that. Alucard's tone was cheerful. Consider it the safety on your new gun, Captain. A very delicate, existential safety. It was a leash. Alucard hadn't given them the cube. He had loaned it to them, with himself holding the only key. The implications were staggering. This was your plan all along, Picard said, his voice cold. Not to fight them, or to truly gift them to us. To place yourself at the center of our greatest strategic prize. To make the Federation dependent on your continued goodwill to maintain control of it. The orb's light brightened, as if pleased. Ding, ding, ding. Give the captain a prize. You're learning how I operate. Absolute victory is boring. Lasting influence? Now that's a game with staying power. You get your trophy, your research, your tactical advantage. I get the knowledge that at any moment, I could choose to walk away, and your prize turns back into the galaxy's most dangerous predator. It keeps things interesting. Worf's phaser was in his hand, aimed at the orb. We should destroy it now. We should destroy the entire cube. This is a trap. And lose all that delicious technology, all that knowledge? Your superiors would court-martial you, Worf. Besides, the orb pulsed, and suddenly, the obsidian tree shifted. A thorny tendril extended, stopping a millimeter from Worf's phaser. It didn't attack, it just pointed. It's rude to shoot the artwork. "Stand down, Lieutenant," Picard said, though the order tasted like ash. He looked at the pulsing heart of Alucard's creation. "What do you want, Alucard? Truly?" The voice from the orb softened, losing its mocking edge for a moment. "I told you, I'm bored. I'm trapped in a universe that's scrubbed itself clean of the kind of darkness I understand. You've offered me nothing but replicated blood and condescending philosophy. This..." The orb glowed, indicating the entire cube. "This is a conversation. The ongoing dialogue between your ideals and my nature. It's the most interesting thing to happen to me in decades, so I'm extending the conversation." He was making them complicit. By accepting the cube, they were accepting his role as its keeper. "We will study this structure," Picard said finally. "We will find a way to stabilize the cube without it. Oh, I'm sure you'll try, and I wish you the best of luck. Truly, it'll give you something to do. In the meantime..." The orb's light began to dim. "I believe I've earned a drink, and since your replicators are inadequate and your moral code prevents you from offering me a criminal to snack on, I'll need to get creative. Don't wait up." The light in the orb winked out. The obsidian structure remained, humming with silent, captive paradox. "He has left the cube," Data confirmed, checking his tricorder. "His signature is back aboard the Enterprise." Picard turned and strode from the chamber, his boots ringing on the metal deck. The victory was complete. They had a Borg cube. They had no casualties. And they had, in every way that mattered, just lost. Alucard materialized on the holodeck in a program he had created during a bored moment the night before. It was a perfect recreation of the Hellsing Manor library. Dark wood, towering shelves, the smell of old paper and gunpowder. A fire crackled in the hearth. He walked to a sideboard and poured a glass of deep red liquid from a crystal decanter. It wasn't blood. It was a simulation, the memory of taste, of warmth, of vitality. It was a ghost of a meal, and it was utterly unsatisfying. He stared into the fire, his reflection shimmering in the glass. The souls within him were quiet, sated not by feeding, but by the profound mischief they had wrought. They had confused a god of logic. It was a different kind of nourishment. "Sir." He didn't turn. He knew who it was. The only person on the ship who would enter without fear. Counselor Deanna Troi stood at the entrance to the library, her hands clasped before her. She looked small amid the Gothic grandeur. "Counselor, come to analyze the monster? To see if I have a heart of gold under all this blood and sarcasm?" "No," she said simply, stepping inside. The firelight danced in her dark eyes. "I came because you're in pain." He froze, the glass halfway to his lips. Then he threw back his head and laughed, a raw, barking sound that held no humor. "Pain? My dear, I'm a vampire. I don't feel pain. I inflict it. It's in the job description." "Loneliness is a kind of pain," she said, her voice gentle but unwavering. "And you are the loneliest being I have ever sensed. You're surrounded by millions of voices, and you are utterly alone. You engineered this entire situation with the Borg, not just for entertainment, but for connection, however twisted. You've tied yourself to us because you have nowhere else to go." The smile faded from his face. The fire popped in the silence. "You're good," he said at last, his voice quiet. He turned to look at her. "You're not entirely wrong. This universe of yours, it's so bright, so sure of itself. It's like being in a room where everyone is singing a song you've never heard, in a key you can't match. I can mock the song. I can try to shatter the instruments. But I can't join in." He swirled the liquid in his glass. So I do the only thing I know how to do. I make the song more interesting. I add a minor chord, a dissonant note. I make sure they can't forget that the darkness exists, because I am standing in the middle of their bright, clean room, casting a very long shadow. Troy took another step forward. There are other ways. You could learn the song. He looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the ancient, weary being beneath the monster was visible. I've forgotten how. Then the mask snapped back into place. The grin returned. But learning is so tedious. Corruption is much faster. Now, if you'll excuse me, counselor, I have a universe to gently torment and a severe lack of actual beverages. This conversation has been almost poignant. Let's not do it again. He vanished, leaving her alone in the simulated library, with only the echo of his loneliness lingering in the air. The Enterprise moved at high warp, a captured god of nightmares in tow. The Borg cube, now designated Asset Theta in Starfleet's dry parlance, was tethered by a network of tractor beams and gravitational guides, a docile monster on a leash. Its silence was the loudest sound on the ship. In the observation lounge, the senior staff faced a view screen filled with the stern, worried faces of Starfleet Command's Special Tactics Committee. "Unprecedented risk, Captain," Admiral Nechayev was saying, her image sharp and severe. "You've attached an existential threat to a greater existential threat and called it a victory. This Alucard holds the only off switch for a Borg cube. That is not a strategic asset. That is the definition of a strategic liability." "We are aware of the complexities, Admiral," Picard replied, his posture rigid. "However, the intelligence gathered from Asset Theta in just 72 hours has already revolutionized our understanding of Borg subspace communication, adaptive shielding, and nanoprobe evolution. The benefits are tangible." "At what cost?" Another admiral cut in. "We have reports that the entity has been exploring the ship. He bypasses security fields. He accesses non-critical databases. He engages crew members in conversations that leave them psychologically unsettled. Counselor Troy's report indicates he is fundamentally antagonistic to our core values. He is also the reason the cube is not currently assimilating Sector 01, Riker pointed out, his tone diplomatic but firm. He operates by his own code, but he has thus far adhered to the letter of his agreement. "The letter," Nechayev emphasized. "We are dealing with a being that treats reality as a suggestion. We need containment, study from a distance. The science vessel Archimedes is being rerouted. You will transfer Asset Theta to their custody at the Azure Nebula. They have specialized quarantine bays and no civilian population to endanger." Picard felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "Admiral, with respect, Alucard is not a specimen to be transferred. He is a sentient, immensely powerful entity. He agreed to this arrangement with the Enterprise. Moving the cube against his wishes could be seen as a betrayal, with catastrophic consequences." "Then make him agree," Nechayev said flatly. "That is your task, Captain. Convince him, or contain him. Starfleet Command's directive is clear. The cube and the entity must be moved to a secure, controlled location within 48 hours. Nechayev out." The screen went dark. The silence in the lounge was heavy. "He will never agree," Troy said softly. "The cube is his leverage, his entertainment. Taking it to a sterile science vessel, away from the interesting crew of the Enterprise. He'll see it as a downgrade, an insult." "Then we must find another way," Worf growled. "We cannot be held hostage by his whims. If Command wishes the cube moved, we must move it. If he resists, we resist." Data looked up from his P-Ed. Our available methods of resisting Alucard have a hypothetical success rate of 0.03%. The only strategy with a higher probability was the Borg's attempted metaphysical quarantine, which he subverted by introducing a more complex paradox. Then we need a new strategy, Picard said, steepling his fingers. One that doesn't involve force. We must appeal to him, find something he wants more than his current game. He wants blood, Geordi said bluntly. Real blood, not replicated. We could, I don't know, offer a compromise? There are penal colonies, violent offenders scheduled for mind wipes or extended rehabilitation? No. Picard's voice was absolute. We will not become procurers for a predator. We will not barter sentient lives, no matter their crimes. That line cannot be crossed. He stood, pacing to the viewport where the silent cube blotted out the stars. There must be another way. Data, review all your interactions with him. Counselor, your empathic impressions. Look for a weakness that isn't physical, a desire that isn't predation. The meeting dissolved into a tense planning session, a chess game against an opponent who laughed at the board. Alucard was in 10 forward, and 10 forward had never been so tense. He sat at the central window table, a glass of something dark and swirling in front of him, synthesized, Guinan had informed him with an unreadable look. The usual hum of conversation was absent. Crew members gave the table a wide berth, shooting furtive glances at the man in red, who stared out at the tethered cube with a proprietor's satisfaction. Guinan approached, her tall hat brushing a hanging light. She placed a second glass on the table, this one containing a vibrant blue liquid, and sat opposite him without invitation. You know, Alucard said without turning, most people are afraid to sit with me. They think I'll make a comment about their arteries or turn their shadow into a dog. You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm very old, Guinan replied, her voice like stone smoothed by a river. And I've seen monsters before. The ones who wear fangs on the outside are often less dangerous than the ones who wear them on the inside. He finally looked at her, his crimson eyes narrowing behind his glasses. Oh? And what kind of fangs do you have, my dear? The kind that remember. She took a sip of her drink. You're bored. And you're trying to stave off the boredom by pulling at the threads of this ship, this crew, this federation, like a child picking at a scab. An accurate, if crude, metaphor. And your point? My point is that children who pick scabs eventually draw blood, and then someone has to clean up the mess. She leaned forward slightly. They're going to try to take your toy away, you know. The cube. Alucard's smile was slow and sharp. I know. I can hear the frantic little thoughts buzzing from the observation lounge. They're trying to figure out how to ask nicely. It's adorable. Will you let them? Will it be more interesting if I do or if I don't? He swirled his drink. That's always the question, isn't it? Interesting for who? Guinan asked. For you? Or for the people who might get hurt when you say no? His gaze turned cold. Don't try the moral high ground with me, bartender. I've walked over the buried bodies of people who thought they had the high ground. Morality is a shifting sand dune. Entertainment is a constant. Entertainment is empty, she said. It's the sugar of existence. It gives you a rush, then leaves you hungrier than before. What you're feeling isn't boredom, it's hunger, and you're trying to feed it with parlor tricks and psychological warfare. For a long moment, he said nothing. The ambient noise of 10 forward seemed to recede further. What? He asked quietly. Would you suggest I eat instead? Connection, she said simply. Purpose, something real. You've spent 600 years being a weapon. What happens when the war is over and the weapon is left in a universe that's made peace? It rusts. he whispered, the word slipping out before he could stop it. He looked out again at the cube, his reflection superimposed over its dark shape. It becomes a museum piece, a curiosity, a monster in a cage that children point at. Or, Guinan said, standing and collecting his empty glass, it could learn to be something else. The choice, as it always has been, is yours. But choose quickly. The clock is ticking. She walked away, leaving him alone with the stars and the silent Leviathan proof of his power. The choice crystallized for him then. Starfleet would try to box him, to put him and his cube in a neat, safe container. They would turn his grand, chaotic statement into a classified experiment. The interesting crew of the Enterprise, with their moral dilemmas and stubborn hope, would be replaced by faceless scientists. No, that was not how this story ended. He stood up. Every eye in 10 forward followed him as he walked to the door. He didn't phase. He didn't vanish. He walked with deliberate, echoing steps, a king leaving a court that had just declared its intent to dethrone him. He went straight to the bridge. The turbolift doors opened. The officers on duty tensed. Picard, who was at the command chair discussing trajectories with Data, turned. "Alucard, this is a restricted—" "I know what you're planning, Captain," Alucard interrupted, his voice devoid of its usual mockery. It was flat final. "You're going to try to give me and my cube to the men in the nice, clean lab coats. You're going to try to put us in a jar." Picard stood his ground. "Starfleet Command believes it is the safest course of action." "The safest course of action," Alucard repeated, stepping onto the bridge. The lighting seemed to dim around him. "Tell me, Captain, when you faced the Borg at Wolf 359, was your course of action safe? When you stood down the crystalline entity or faced down Q or challenged the Romulans in the neutral zone, was it ever about safety? Or was it about something more?" "This is different," Riker said. "No, it's exactly the same. You face something you don't understand, something that frightens your superiors, and your first instinct is to lock it away, to stop the conversation." He stopped in the center of the bridge, looking at each of them. "But the conversation is the only interesting thing happening in this quadrant. So here is my counteroffer, my final offer." He pointed a gloved finger at the view screen, at the cube. "You want it moved? Fine, but not to your science vessel. You take it, and you take me, to the one place in this peaceful federation where the conversation between order and chaos, hope and horror, is still being shouted at the top of everyone's lungs. You take us to the front lines." Picard's eyes widened. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Alucard said, a wild, dangerous light returning to his eyes, "that you point this ship at your worst enemy. The Dominion in the Gamma Quadrant, the Romulan Tal Shiar black sites, the Cardassian border wars. You find the place where your utopian philosophy is cracking under the pressure of real, honest-to-God evil, and you drop me into the middle of it." He spread his arms wide, his coat flaring. "You want to study me? Study me in the field. You want to contain me. Contain me by pointing me at something you actually want destroyed. Give me a war, Picard, a real one. And in return, you can keep your cube. Study it to your heart's content, and I promise I'll be too busy to make your life a living hell." The bridge was stunned into silence. It was monstrous. It was logical. It was the most Alucard proposal imaginable. "You would become a weapon for the Federation," Data stated. "I would become a weapon pointed at the Federation's enemies," Alucard corrected. "There's a difference. A subtle one, but important. I'm not joining your club. I'm renting my services. Payment, a steady supply of acceptable targets, and the continued fascinating spectacle of you trying to maintain your morals while wielding a hammer like me." He looked at Picard, and for the first time, there was no mockery, no playful malice. It was a pure, stark challenge. "So, Captain, you wanted a way forward? Here it is. You can try to cage the monster and likely die in the attempt. Or you can point the monster at the other monsters and see what happens. Which version of Starfleet are you? The one that hides from the darkness? Or the one that, just this once, is willing to use it?" Every eye on the bridge turned to Picard. The weight of the choice, the future of the Federation, perhaps, balanced on his next words. The silence on the bridge was a physical thing, thick and charged like the air before a lightning strike. Alucard's proposal hung between them, a live grenade with the pin pulled. Picard saw the ramifications unfold with the cold clarity of a tactical simulation. If he said no, they would follow Nechaev's orders. They would attempt to transfer the cube and contain Alucard. The attempt would fail. People would die. The cube might be lost, or worse, reactivated in a chaotic battle that could destroy the Enterprise. If he said yes, he would be deliberately unleashing an immortal, amoral predator upon the Federation's enemies. He would be sanctioning a kind of warfare that violated every principle of the Federation he served. He would become the keeper of a nightmare, responsible for where it fed. But Alucard was right about one thing. The monster already existed. It was here. The choice wasn't about creating a weapon. It was about where to aim it. Picard broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. "We are not executioners. We are not judges, juries, and dispensers of final punishment." "No," Alucard agreed easily. "You're diplomats and explorers. And sometimes, diplomats need a big stick to make the other side listen. I'm not asking you to judge. I'm asking you to identify. You have enemies, Captain. Enemies who would see your Federation burn, who practice slavery, genocide, and conquest as policy. I'm not interested in your political squabbles. I'm interested in the irredeemable, the ones even your boundless compassion can't save. Point me at them." Picard looked to his crew. Worf's expression was fierce, conflicted. He saw the brutal logic, but revered honor. Troy's face was pale. She felt the dark, eager hunger coiling behind Alucard's words. Data's head was tilted, processing the ethical algorithm. Riker's jaw was set, the first officer waiting for his captain's lead. "We would require strict protocols," Picard said slowly, each word measured. "You would operate under my direct authority, or the authority of a designated Starfleet commander. Your actions would be scoped, monitored, and approved. There would be rules of engagement." Alucard's smile returned, but it was thin, a negotiator's smile. "Rules. Of course. No innocent bystanders. No collateral damage beyond mission parameters. Targets must be verified as acceptable by your moral compass. I can work with rules. Rules are just the edges of the playing field. They don't stop the game. They define it." "And the cube?" Riker asked. "Remains with you. My little art project keeps it quiet. Consider it a gesture of good faith, or, if you prefer, a hostage. You behave, the cube behaves. You try to double-cross me, and the cube wakes up cranky." It was the same leverage, inverted. He was giving them the cube's control in exchange for a mandate to hunt. Picard made his decision. It was not a Starfleet decision. It was a captain's decision, made in the gray space where principles meet survival. "Here are my terms," Picard said, stepping down to stand face to face with Alucard. The difference in their presence was staggering. One, the epitome of enlightened humanity. The other, a relic of its darkest myths. 1. You are attached to the Enterprise as a special tactical consultant. You answer to me. 2. We will not seek out conflict, but when we are confronted by a hostile force that meets the criteria of being an existential, genocidal threat, you may be deployed. 3. No feeding on sentient beings without their explicit, conscious consent, except on designated hostile targets during sanctioned engagements. We will work with Dr. Crusher to synthesize a viable blood substitute. Alucard raised an eyebrow. Consent? Captain, you're sucking all the fun out of vampirism. Those are my terms. Accept them, or we will have a very different conversation. Alucard studied him for a long moment, then chuckled. You drive a hard bargain. Fine. I accept your quaint rules. For now. He extended a gloved hand. Shall we seal the deal? No biting, I promise. Picard looked at the offered hand, a gesture from a being who defied all categories. He took it. The grip was firm, cold, and pulsed with a power that made the hairs on Picard's arms stand up. Welcome to the crew, consultant, Picard said, releasing the hand. Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Alucard purred. He turned to the view screen, looking at the cube with proprietary satisfaction. So, Captain, where to first? I believe you mentioned something about the Cardassian border? I hear Gul Dukat has such a punchable face. Our course remains set for the Azure Nebula to rendezvous with the Archimedes, Picard said firmly, where I will inform Admiral Nechayev of our new operational arrangement. Alucard's grin was blinding. I can't wait to meet her. The transmission with Admiral Nechayev was predictably volcanic. You have done what, Picard? You formally enlisted a paranormal entity as a tactical asset? This is beyond insubordination. This is madness. It is pragmatism, Admiral, Picard replied, his image steady on the screen in his ready room. We have contained the Borg threat and channeled the Alucard threat into a controllable, directed outlet. The Enterprise will remain as his oversight. The cube remains under our control. This is, by any metric, the optimal outcome. Optimal? You've given a nightmare a Starfleet commission. The political fallout alone will be managed, Picard interrupted, a rare steel in his voice. The alternative was a battle we could not win and the loss of an intelligence asset that may prove crucial against the Borg. This is my decision, made under my authority as captain of the Enterprise. I will, of course, submit a full report to the Federation Council. Nechayev's face was a mask of fury, but behind it, Picard saw the calculating strategist. She saw the same logic. She just hated it. This is not over, Picard. You have placed a sword of Damocles over your own head and over the Federation's. See that it doesn't fall. The screen went dark. Picard sank into his chair, feeling the weight of the sword precisely. He had just rewritten the rules. He had brought the monster inside the gates. A chime at his door. Enter. It was Alucard. He leaned against the doorframe, holding a pad. Just finished the draft of my personnel file. Under special skills, I put reality negation, mass soul consumption, and impeccable taste in dramatic entrances. HR is going to love me. Picard didn't smile. This will not be a game, Alucard. The moment you violate our agreement, the moment you harm an innocent or act outside my command, this arrangement ends, and I will dedicate every resource of Starfleet to containing you, even if it costs me my ship and my life. The humor faded from Alucard's face. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him. I believe you would, Captain. That's what makes you so fascinating. You're willing to dance with the devil, but you keep your hand on the holy water. It's a delicate balance. He tossed the pad onto the desk. Don't worry, I'll play by your rules, for now. The universe is vast. There will be plenty of acceptable targets. And watching you squirm while you justify using me will be entertainment enough. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Captain? You should know. The Borg aren't the only ones who felt my little arrival. There are other things in the darkness of this universe of yours. Older things. They felt the ripple too. They're curious. Picard felt a new chill. What are you saying? I'm saying the conversation just got bigger. Alucard tipped his hat. Sweet dreams, Captain. He was gone. Picard sat alone in his ready room, the hum of the ship around him, the monstrous cube hanging in space beside them, and the darkness now walking his corridors wearing a red coat. He had averted one catastrophe and invited in another. He had preserved his crew and compromised his soul. He had saved the Federation from a Borg cube and potentially damned it by the means he used. He looked out at the stars, the infinite promise of his youth now shadowed by an infinite, hungry darkness he had chosen to harness. The galaxy had just become a much darker and infinitely more interesting place. The Enterprise sailed on, a beacon of light towing a shadow. The Borg cube, Asset Theta, became a floating institute of forbidden knowledge, its paralyzing paradox studied by teams of wary scientists. And aboard the Federation's flagship, a new kind of officer reported for duty. He attended no briefings, wore no uniform, and his service record was a classified nightmare. But when the Dominion later poured through the wormhole, when the Borg collective returned with a vengeance, when threats emerged that diplomacy could not soften or technology could not defeat, Starfleet had an answer it never wanted. They would open a door, and a man in red would walk out, smiling. Captain Jean-Luc Picard had made a pact with the oldest evil there is, the belief that the ends can justify the means. He had traded a piece of his universe's soul for its safety. And in the quiet moments, he wondered if the Federation had truly evolved beyond monsters, or if it had simply learned to put them on a payroll. The universe, as Q had once taunted, was not a tidy place. And now, thanks to Picard's choice, it had a new, chaotic, and immortal player in its eternal game. The age of innocent exploration was over. A darker, more pragmatic star had risen,